Welcome to another edition of the Hoop Scoop. I'm Jared Johnson, and he's the Mighty Joe Yeager. Well, Mighty Joe, 3-game losing streak for the Red Raiders. And, you know, I really enjoyed your Yeager shots after the loss. Well, all of them always, of course. We all enjoy Mighty Joe's coverage of Texas Tech basketball. But the loss at Baylor, obviously no Warren Washington. As soon as I knew that, that's a loss. And I think everybody at the, obviously I wasn't alone in thinking that, except for the Texas Tech players and the Texas Tech team. I felt better about them after last night, which is really weird to say, given it's a 3-game losing streak, you lose to an in-state rival, all that stuff. But this is such a resilient team. It's so admirable. It's flawed. It's very flawed. But it's one of the more admirable teams in terms of its resiliency, its heart, all those kinds of things. This isn't like one of those situations, my Joe, where I'm like, oh, it's a moral victory. I think it's a real tangible thing, and we've seen them come back and win games because of this resiliency. And I think if they can just win enough games and get in the tournament, I think we may see them overachieve like we have so far this season.
Yeah, the character of the team, the resiliency, the toughness, the grit, all that stuff is something that is going to keep them in the vast majority of games that they play. I mean, if you can play Baylor to within 6 there, missing both Washingtons, basically, but particularly Warren Washington, then, I mean, that tells you should be in really every game on your schedule, and it's just a matter of coming through and getting on the right side of those games. And now the flip side of that is, as you said, it's a flawed roster.
Yeah.
It's a small team. I've said it repeatedly that this is basically a kind of a glorified mid-major roster. It's like a really good mid-major team in terms of its size and just the way it's built, very sort of guard-oriented with one big man, and even the big man isn't what you call a big like Hulk or anything like that in Warren Washington, more kind of almost a small forward type who happens to be 7 foot tall. So because of that, you're not going to be able to separate from teams either.
Yeah.
And what this means is if you got all the character to keep you in games, at the same time you don't have the talent and the overall skill to just blow people out, that means every game is going to be pretty daggum close.
Yeah.
So Tech is going to be just in a lot of 2-possession games down the stretch, and what they do with the remainder of this season depends on how they finish these games, and obviously it depends on how healthy they can get and stay healthy, and hopefully this flu bug passes on through and there's no further problems on that front for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, I think we have to mention that Texas Tech, the team has been ravaged by the flu, clearly. But also, I'm an end result kind of dude as well. No excuses. This is the kind of thing, like I knew this was coming. I didn't know it was going to be a flu, but I knew Tech got off to a 5-1 start in the Big 12. Seemed like every little thing kind of was going their way in these close games. I mean, things even out, and in the course of a basketball season, even really good teams, even the team that was seconds away from winning the national championship here in 2019, go through their tough stretches of a season. There have been a couple of really remarkable, extraordinary teams that have gone, almost undefeated, and of course one that did go undefeated, Indiana, but that's few and far between. Even really good teams have those down times. You just got to hope that you come back and that you're on fire, you're hot and all that and healthy at the right time. This may be really good timing. To me, the best timing is start off strong, you have that downtime, and then you come back with a strong flourish. Let's hope Texas Tech can get healthy and do that.
Yeah, and it's just, I guess, a question of when do they snap back?
Yeah.
When do they start winning again?
Yeah.
Because in this conference, you look at Tech's schedule from here on out, and there literally are no gimmies. There are no sure wins. They're all going to be very, very tough games. So when do they get rolling again? When do the wins start coming in again? I mean, here's an opportunity with Central Florida coming to town on Saturday. And, I mean, there's not a gimme, but, I mean, if there's anything that's relatively close to it, that might be it on your schedule. So you need to get this one. You don't want to lose this game, but a lot of that again is going to be, how healthy are these guys? But if you go in there in a weakened condition like they were against Cincinnati,
Yeah.
because the flu was a factor then too, obviously,
Yes.
because this is the same kind of team. With Central Florida, big, physical team. So it could be the same sort of scenario, and you need to come through on the right side.
Not only is UCF the same kind of team in terms of style and roster and all that, and can hurt Tech where Tech's light, where Tech's weaker, but it's same in terms of like the outlook of the season and the resume in terms of getting in the tournament. I mean, that Cincinnati loss to me was the worst loss of the season. It's at home, Cincinnati, not a terrible team, but that's a game that a ranked Texas Tech team hoping to continue to compete for a Big 12 title and, obviously to get in the tournament, you got to win that game. UCF is the same vein for me. Flu, no flu, all that. Texas Tech has to find a way, bank on that resiliency, the home crowd, all that. They have to get the win against UCF, in my opinion. So it's all of a sudden that becomes a big game. You mentioned they're a big team. Give us a couple of, a heads up on this game, what to look for Texas Tech.
Yeah, well, I said big, and I mean it. They can go 6'10", 6'11", 7 foot on the front line. And these are not beanpole guys. These are pretty big dudes. So you've got that to deal with, which looks a lot like Cincinnati. You've got a point guard, Darius Johnson, who's 6'1", 200, and is a good defensive player. Okay. Now, we've seen what happened with Jamal Shedd, Micah Peavy, John Newman from Cincinnati, these stopper types. Now, I'm not quite putting Johnson in that same category yet, but he's a defensive pest, and he can cause problems for Joe Toussaint and Pop Isaacs. So there's that parallel as well. Now, I don't think that Central Florida has quite the weapons and the offensive skill that Cincinnati did. However, they do have one guy, Jalen Sellers, who's about like Pop in terms of scoring, about 17 points a game, and he can hurt you pretty badly. He's not a great deep shooter, but he gets into the mid-range and can get to the rack and finish pretty well. You don't need him going off for 24 or 25 points. Because he can single-handedly keep them in the game with Texas Tech. If, on the other hand, they are able to hold him down, I don't think they have enough other weapons that they should be able to keep up with Texas Tech. Because Texas Tech, I mean, again, assuming that they're pretty healthy, I just believe they've got enough weapons and enough shooters, and I can't think that Pop is going to have another really bad game like he did against Baylor last night shooting. I mean, face it, it was not one of his better games. I like him maybe to bounce back in this one a little bit, and if that happens and you keep Sellers down, then they shouldn't be able to keep up, and maybe Tech can separate a little bit towards the end.
I think the key for Pop is shot selection and him being off the ball. I just think he's so much better off the ball than he is as like a point guard. Like when he tries to do too much, period, he struggles. When he doesn't, when he plays within the system, Pop is as good as anybody. Now, don't get me wrong, like where do you draw the line there at Pop? Because he is good at creating for himself. He can go off and get hot and be as dangerous of an offensive player as there is in the Big 12, which is saying something. But he can also really hurt you. Some of those shots. I mean, I think he got caught up in the emotion of the crowd booing him in Waco and all that, and that's understandable. It's got to be a really emotional time for Pop Isaacs, considering all the things that's been happening off the court for him, which has been well documented. But I want to. Before we finish, I want to wrap up with one thing because, boy, Kiron Lindsay is probably one of the more talked about players who doesn't play a whole lot. He got in against Baylor, showed some good things, showed some bad things, I think. I actually mentioned in the game thread, joking with one of our nicer long-term posters, and I think he got fighting mad just for me saying that he was mad about Kiron Lindsay. People are, my point in bringing that up is people are intense about their belief that Kiron Lindsay could help Texas Tech. What's your thoughts on Kiron Lindsay after seeing just a little bit of him against Baylor last night?
Yeah, I mean, we got enough of a picture, in that we played 12 minutes, and they were meaningful minutes. I mean,
Right.
this wasn't mop-up stuff. This was in the heart of the game. And my first overall impression was that I didn't think he hurt Texas Tech for the most part. I mean, when he was in there for Robert Jennings, the team still passed the eyeball test. I wasn't seeing a general decline in overall play. The team still functioned well, I thought, with him on the court. Now, it's not like it was any sort of a revelation or that he took over the game or anything like that. And he wasn't an improvement over Robert Jennings. But I didn't think for the most part he hurt you. Now, there was one exception. And we're talking about on-ball defense for the most part. I mean, you can see with some failings in that area, probably the main reason why he just hadn't been getting on the court. I mean, he can be exposed if he has to guard somebody away from the bucket, So, and, that's on paper, so people know about that now with Kiron Lindsay, and they're going to, when he's on the court, if he's on the court, they're going to try to put him in those situations where he can't defend. So he's got to improve in that area. And, I mean, if Warren Washington is out for another game, which we certainly hope not, but if he is, obviously he's going to have to play more. And, Kiron Lindsay is going to have to play more. And you're just going to have to help him out on defense. If he gets out there where you're just having to guard somebody out at the free throw line, you got to have players who are ready to help off, which exposes you in other areas. But hey, you got to do what you got to do. You can't let people just blow by you and dunk it. So, that's kind of what I saw with Kiron Lindsay.
All right, Mighty Joe. Great stuff from you as always, man. 3 p.m. Saturday, Texas Tech will host UCF in a big game all of a sudden for the Red Raiders here at the USA. Mighty Joe, thank you. Thank you all for watching, and until next time.